Steve Mazzagatti. The referee is meant to be invisible, an impartial guardian of rules, safety, and order. Steve Mazzagatti was none of these things. In the dark ages of MMA regulation, he was somehow everywhere, recognizable by his thick mustache, unblinking gaze, and complete inability to read a moment. If there was a disaster to be refereed, Mazzagatti often stood at the center of it. Jon Jones has one official loss on his record. It didn't come by knockout. It wasn't a submission. It came after Jones unleashed a brutal storm of elbows on Matt Hamill, who was already overwhelmed, already defenseless. But one of those elbows came straight down. 12-6, technically illegal. Steve Mazzagatti didn't just call the foul, he ended the fight. Disqualified the most dominant fighter of his era. The only blemish on Jones's legacy isn't from a fight, it's from Steve. Then there was Josh Burkman versus John Fitch. Burkman choked Fitch unconscious in the first round. Completely limp, body collapsed. Mazzagatti just watched, didn't stop it, didn't touch them. Only when Burkman let go on his own did the fight end. Fitch's lifeless body falling flat. That wasn't protecting a fighter, that was negligence. And when Anthony Johnson was repeatedly poked in the eye by Kevin Burns, clearly in pain, clearly impaired, Mazzagatti refused to intervene. Mazzagatti awarded the victory to Burns. No warning, no foul, no awareness. It became a pattern. Too slow to stop submissions, too quick to interrupt ground control, over-penalizing minor fouls, missing egregious ones altogether. His worst trait wasn't bias, it was chaos. He did not understand rhythm, he did not recognize danger. He made himself visible in all the wrong ways. Dana White eventually banned him from officiating UFC events altogether. In a now viral media scrum, White unloaded, "That guy has no business being anywhere near professional fighting, ever." That was after Rousimar Palhares gouged Jake Shields' eyes repeatedly, setting up a dirty submission in World Series of Fighting. Mazzagatti stood a few feet away. He let it happen. Steve Mazzagatti wasn't a referee. He was an obstacle, a wild card inserted into careers, records, and physical well-being. And unlike most bad officials, he had the rare honor of being hated by fighters, fans, commentators, and promoters alike. Mario Yamasaki. When Dana White writes an entire Instagram post about a referee, it's never a thank you card. And with Mario Yamasaki, he might have needed a whole series. This is the guy who watched Valentina Shevchenko deliver a 142-strike beatdown on debuting Priscilla Cachoeira and just let it happen. Cachoeira tore her ACL, took 2 takedowns, 30 head strikes, and about 5 years off her life before Yamasaki finally stepped in. It wasn't early, it wasn't late, it was criminal. Afterward, Yamasaki said he was letting her be a warrior. That became his legacy. But long before the warrior quote, the red flags were already flying. UFC 142, Eric Silva versus Carlo Prater. Silva lands a quick flurry, drops Prater, hammer fists, done. Joe Rogan starts gearing up for the post-fight interview. Then Yamasaki throws the curveball. Disqualification. The punches, he said, were illegal to the back of the head. On replay, most landed clean. Rogan literally confronted him live on the mic, asking if he'd like to change his mind while watching. Yamasaki stood by the call. He always stood by the call. Kevin Lee versus Michael Chiesa. The submission that never was. Lee locks in a rear naked choke. Chiesa is defending. He never taps. But Mario decides it's time and stops it anyway. Chiesa leaps to his feet, furious, still conscious, still in the fight. Lee looks confused. The crowd boos. Yamasaki shrugs. And it wasn't just UFC. In Bellator, in LFA, in Jungle Fight, if there was a strange stoppage, Yamasaki was often nearby. OSP knocked out Shogun Rua. Mario just watched him fall like a tree. Matt Hughes versus Frank Trigg 2. Groin shot, missed. Matthew Lopez hammering Johnny Eduardo into oblivion, uncalled. He never seemed to notice when a fighter was out, bleeding, or screaming, but he always noticed when the crowd was already booing. Eventually, Dana White banned him from the UFC, saying he should never officiate again. Yamasaki responded with something between defiance and delusion. Fans want to see blood. The commission wants safety. I'm somewhere in the middle. The middle, in his case, usually meant about 25 strikes too late. Kim Winslow. Kim Winslow made history as the UFC's first female referee. Then she made headlines for everything else. There's bad officiating, and then there's Cyborg versus Jan Finney, a one-sided mugging in 2010 that somehow wasn't stopped for 2 entire rounds. Finney was outmatched from the first exchange. Cyborg teed off like she was hitting a heavy bag with a grudge. Winslow stood a few feet away, watching Finney get dropped, ragdolled, and mounted, then ordered back to her feet just to get battered again. By the time it ended, Finney looked like she'd been jumped in a parking garage. Joe Rogan called it a travesty. Fans were still asking days later if the ref had been watching the same fight, but Winslow wasn't done. Next up, King Mo versus Lawrence Larkin. Mo lands an early takedown and starts raining down elbows. Dominant position, steady ground and pound. Winslow watches for over 3 minutes, then out of nowhere stands them up. No warning, no logic, just stand up. Mo gets another takedown in round 2. This time he doesn't leave it to chance. He unloads on Larkin. 17 unanswered strikes. Larkin doesn't move. Winslow finally stops it. Late this time, so too quick when it made no sense. Too slow when it mattered. After the fight, King Mo said she should fight Cyborg herself if she wants to see what that feels like. Put on some gloves, see what it's like to get hit. That wasn't just frustration, it was disbelief, because fighters didn't trust her judgment, and neither did the fans. Cecil Peoples. Cecil Peoples didn't just referee MMA fights, he performed them. While other officials tried to blend into the background, Cecil opened fights in a crane stance like he was prepping for a scene in Karate Kid. Then he'd mutter his signature phrase, "Let's dance," and backpedal theatrically out of frame, almost like he wanted to be tackled. It would have been charming if the fights themselves weren't a mess. Jorge Santiago versus Sean Salmon. Santiago lands a clean knockout, Salmon crumbles. Cecil doesn't step in, he doesn't wave it off. He gets a running start and jumps over the unconscious body like he's clearing a hurdle. Not a ref, a parkour enthusiast. Nate Quarry versus Pete Sell. Sell gets dropped, Quarry moves in for the finish. Peoples dives on them like he's trying to cover a fumble. He doesn't call the fight, he just lays there, sandwiched between 2 confused fighters. Quarry is still in mount. Sell is still alert. Cecil is explaining mid-scramble that the fight is over. No one knows why. Sell argues. Cecil shrugs. Quarry looks like he just got flagged for unnecessary grappling. And let's not forget, Cecil Peoples was also a judge, and somehow worse at that. He's the guy who once said leg kicks don't win fights, which might come as a surprise to Edson Barboza, Jose Aldo, and Science. He had a rare talent for doing too much and not enough at the same time. Dramatic dives, delayed stoppages, bizarre rulings. Fighter goes limp, Cecil might jump over him. Fighter still defending, Cecil might stop the fight and explain it on the ground. He wasn't malicious, he wasn't biased, he was just Cecil, a man who seemed permanently 1 second behind and won reality over. Mike England. If you're fighting in Missouri and the ref has a thick mustache and a 1,000-yard stare, check again. It might be Mike England. And if so, good luck. England's resume reads like a training manual for what not to do. Mistimed stoppages, rule misreads, letting fighters nap mid-choke. Let's start with a classic. UFC on Fox 24, Zach Cummings versus Nathan Coy. Cummings sinks in a guillotine at the end of round 1. Coy doesn't tap because he's already unconscious, fully out. The round ends. England walks over and starts checking, slowly. Coy's limbs are loose, eyes gone, flatlined. England still isn't sure. He gives it a few more seconds, maybe waits for a sign from the heavens. Coy eventually wakes up, looking like he time traveled. The submission was clear. The moment was gone. But the worst moments didn't happen in the UFC. They happened in Invicta. And there, England went full experimental theater. Tanya Evinger versus Yana Kunitskaya. Evinger tries to defend an armbar by stepping on Kunitskaya's face. A legal technique. England calls it a foul, stops the action. Gives position to Kunitskaya, who submits her seconds later. Evinger loses her title. Then the commission reviews the tape. The move was legal. England blew it. The result is overturned. A title fight invalidated because the referee didn't know the rule book. Same night, Livia Renata Souza versus Ayaka Yamasaki. Souza pounds away with elbows, punch after punch. Yamasaki is trapped. England watches. The punishment goes on and on. By the time he stops it, Yamasaki looks like she'd just been audited. decided. Too late. Again, it's not just one mistake, it's repetition. England has a habit of missing the obvious, misreading the technical, and hesitating at the worst moments. When you're officiating in the same region for years and fighters still don't feel safe with you in the cage, that's not a coincidence. Mike England isn't theatrical. He's not trying to be famous, but he is consistently unsure, and that's not safer, it's just quieter. John Schorle. One of the few things a referee absolutely cannot do in MMA is stop watching the fight. WEC 19, Rob McCulloch versus Olaf Alfonso. Early in round 2, McCulloch lands a bomb that blasts Alfonso's mouthpiece clean across the cage. It's a big moment. Alfonso stumbles. McCulloch rushes in to finish. John Schorle, the third man in the cage, decides now's a good time to turn away and go get the mouthpiece. Not a joke. He literally walks off to fetch it. As McCulloch is setting up ground and pound on a compromised fighter, the referee is focused on dental equipment. By the time Schorle turns back around, it's over. Alfonso's already taken more shots. The fight is done. The lesson: don't assign tasks that involve turning your back on an active knockout. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't indecisive. It was just dumb. And in MMA, dumb is dangerous. There's not much else on his record, which is probably a good thing. John Schorle's career lives in the background like a PSA. Never take your eyes off the fight, because that 1 second could be the last second a fighter has to defend himself. Todd Anderson. Todd Anderson didn't blow his career on one decision. He blew it on none at all. UFC 208, Holly Holm versus Germaine de Randamie, the inaugural women's featherweight title. High stakes, big stage, end of round 2. The horn sounds. De Randamie launches a straight right hand that rocks Holm square in the face. Clearly late, clearly illegal. Anderson steps in and issues a warning. Round 3 ends, another bell, another combo from de Randamie. This time, a 1-2. Anderson warns her again. 2 fouls, 2 warnings, 0 points deducted. Both infractions came after the bell. Both shook Holm, and both arguably changed the fight. The scorecards, razor thin, 1 point off, and Holm walks out champion. Instead, Anderson kept the whistle in his pocket and let history play out untouched. He wasn't indecisive, he was inactive. The kind of ref who thinks rules are suggestions and consequences are optional. It took until the 5th round for Anderson to finally step in before the bell and make sure no more late shots landed. By then, it was too late to matter. And that's the story. Not a ref who did too much, but one who did absolutely nothing when it counted the most. Herb Dean. Herb Dean is the gold standard, or at least he was. Then came Dan Hardy yelling from cage side, UFC Fight Island. Francisco Trinaldo versus Jai Herbert. Herbert gets dropped with a bomb. He's flat on his back, eyes lost, hands down. Trinaldo stands over him, pauses, looks at Herb. Herb does nothing. Trinaldo shrugs and delivers a few more punches. That's when Herb steps in. Dan Hardy, commentating live, shouts, "Stop the fight, Herb, that's late." Hardy wasn't alone. Twitter lit up. Fighters weighed in. Herb defended the call, said he was waiting for Herbert to intelligently defend, but the tape shows something closer to hesitation. Then came Ben Askren versus Robbie Lawler. The Bulldog choke. Askren locks it in. Lawler's arm drops. Herb waves it off, but seconds later, Lawler pops up and protests, conscious, angry, and very much not out. A lot of refs would have called it a mistake. Herb stood by it, said it looked like a limp arm. He might have been right, but he definitely wasn't sure. And that's the thing about Herb Dean. When he's good, he's invisible. When he's off, everyone notices. The slow stops, the is he out moments, the punches after the lights are already off. He's still better than most. Still the guy fighters ask for. But even Herb, calm, deliberate, professional Herb, has left people wondering, what was he waiting for?